Today we're talking about one of the most pivotal moments in modern American history, the 1980 election. And look, this wasn't just about a new president moving into the White House. This was a seismic shift, an election that completely redrew the political map and created the battle lines that, in many ways, we're still fighting on today.
So the big question we're tackling here is how? How did one single election manage to so fundamentally reshape the country's entire political DNA for decades, and I mean decades to come?
All right, let's just start with the final score, right? 489. That was Ronald Reagan's electoral vote count. His opponent, the incumbent president Jimmy Carter, got 49. I mean, that's not just a win, that's a landslide. It felt like the entire country was shouting for a completely different path forward.
But to really get why this happened, you gotta rewind the clock. The late 1970s were not a great time. There was this deep sense of national exhaustion, this feeling that the country was just stuck. A lot of people called it malaise.
And the big, ugly monster at the center of all this? A thing called stagflation. Just imagine this for a second. The price of everything you buy is skyrocketing. At the same time, more and more people are losing their jobs. And the economy itself? It's just not growing. It was a total economic nightmare.
And check this out. This is why the government felt so trapped. All the usual economic tools were useless. If you tried to cool down inflation, you'd make unemployment even worse. If you tried to boost the economy to create jobs, you'd pour gasoline on the fire of inflation. It was a complete catch-22.
And you know, it wasn't just the economy that was making people anxious. Every night on the news, you saw the ongoing Iran hostage crisis. You had these repeated oil shocks that led to these massive, soul-crushing lines at the gas pump. The whole thing just created this overwhelming feeling that the government was incompetent and the country was drifting without a rudder. Okay, so into all this chaos, this gloom, steps a brand new political force. This wasn't your grandpa's Republican Party. This was a new, highly organized coalition that we now call the New Right. And boy, was it ready to tap into all that frustration.
So what was this New Right? Well, it was kind of like a supergroup, brilliantly pulling together three totally different crowds. First, you had the military hawks, folks who believed America needed to get way tougher on the Soviet Union. Then you had pro-business libertarians who were laser-focused on cutting taxes and regulations. And the real engine? A massive grassroots army of social conservatives, fired up about cultural and religious issues.
So you're probably thinking, how on earth do you get all those different people to play on the same team? Simple. You give them a common enemy. And for them, that enemy was a big, bloated, and overreaching federal government. The libertarians saw it as the source of economic ruin, and the social conservatives saw it as the cause of moral decay.
Now, this coalition's big idea for fixing that economic nightmare of stagflation, it was a total U-turn from everything that came before. It was called supply-side economics, but we all know it by its more famous name, Reaganomics.
Okay, so here's the theory in a nutshell. Instead of trying to boost the economy from the bottom up, you start at the top. You slash taxes, especially for big corporations and the wealthiest people. The idea is that this will incentivize them to invest their money, build new factories, and hire more people. This sparks a boom in economic growth, and eventually, all that new wealth is supposed to trickle down to everybody else. But, and this is a huge but that often gets forgotten, it didn't work right away, not even close. In 1981, they passed a massive 25% income tax cut. And what happened right after? A really nasty recession. Unemployment shot up to nearly 11%. It took until the middle of the decade for the economy to actually start recovering in a big way.
All right, so we've talked about the money stuff, but this whole Reagan revolution, it was just as much about culture. At the very same time they were cutting taxes, the social and cultural battles that we still fight today were exploding into the mainstream.
And this is where that third part of the coalition, the social conservatives, really came into play. Groups like the Moral Majority and Focus on the Family, along with powerful televangelists, became masters at organizing. They turned millions of conservative Christians into one of the most reliable and powerful voting blocs in the country, all with the stated goal of restoring so-called traditional values. But here's the really savvy part. The New Right knew that winning elections was one thing, but if you want to make change that lasts, you have to play the long game. And that meant one thing above all else: the judiciary, the courts.
And wow, were they successful. Just look at these appointments to the Supreme Court. People like Sandra Day O'Connor, William Rehnquist, Antonin Scalia. These weren't just new judges. They represented a fundamental ideological shift on the court that would last for a generation, championing ideas like originalism and beginning to roll back federal power.
Okay, so let's fast forward. After 8 years of all this, what was the actual legacy? What were the long-term consequences? Well, this is where we run into some of the biggest and most lasting contradictions of the era.
And this right here might be the biggest paradox of the whole era. Remember the goal? Shrink the government. And yeah, they did cut about $40 billion from domestic spending, but that was totally swamped by a massive $150 billion increase in military spending. The result? Absolutely huge, record-breaking national deficits.
And that debt, it wasn't just a number on a page. It became a powerful political weapon. It created what some people call a structural cage. From that point on, anytime a politician wanted to propose a big new government program, the first question was always, great, but how are you going to pay for it without blowing up the deficit? It was an incredibly effective way to box in liberal ambitions for a generation. But, and this is really interesting, this conservative revolution hit a wall. While they successfully cut a lot of programs, when they tried to go after the big ones, the real pillars of the system, like Social Security and Medicare, the public pushed back hard. Those programs proved to be way more popular than anyone thought.
So, when all was said and done, what the Reagan years really did was cement the central argument of American life. This constant tug-of-war over the size and role of the federal government, that became the new normal. It became the main event in American politics.
And that brings us right back to today, doesn't it? Because this is the exact debate we all inherited. It's the core tension that was locked into place back in the 1980s. So the question for us is, how do you solve it? How do we balance this powerful desire for less government with the undeniable public support for the biggest things that government actually does? That, right there, is the puzzle that continues to define our politics.